Hello everyone, today we're here with Christopher Gregory, who's kindly coming to give us a lecture today at Stowe School around Pauline Boty. So thank you so much for coming today. Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Certainly. So my background isn't in art actually. It's in graphic design and publishing. But I've always had an interest in art, and I would enjoy to talk about how I came across Pauline Boty in particular.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So essentially, I've always had an interest in the 1960s and 1960s pop culture in particular. I was a bit too young to actually appreciate it at the time, but I remember I came across my mother's Beatles collection, and I guess I was about 10 or so, and then I started listening, playing all these records, and I became obsessed as a sort of youngster. That's never left me actually. So that kind of appreciation of 60s music, 60s art, 60s film, fashion, I think as time went on and I became more aware that London in particular was a centre of the pop cultural universe for a while, with swinging London in the mid 60s, and I just thought that was quite remarkable actually. And I mean, one thing led to another, and more recently, I guess about 15 years ago, I started collecting ephemera, magazines, catalogues, posters, and I'd been collecting one magazine in particular called Town. And this was a magazine set up by Michael Heseltine, the politician. And what was really interesting about it was that he got some of the best photographers, people like David Bailey, Don McCullen, Terence Donovan, Brian Duffy, to start their careers. You have brilliant writers, brilliant illustrators, fantastic graphic design. And I just started collecting these. And what happened was I got this email one day back in 2011 from someone I'd been buying the odd copy of the magazine from. And he said to me, we said in this email, would you happen to have a copy of Town magazine with Marilyn on the cover? So could you send an image? I was like, sure, sent it off. And he wrote back and he said, thanks very much, could you send the inside spread? So I sent that off as well. And back this reply came, thanks very much. It's to do with trying to track down the source of a painting by pop artist Pauline Boty. And I thought, how come I've never heard of Pauline Boty? I know Peter Blake and Derek Bosher and Peter Phillips and David Hockney, but Pauline Boty, unknown name to me. So I started looking into, I did a search online and started seeing her art and just became fascinated with the backstory. So this is the magazine in question, and this is actually from the last shoot of Marilyn. It's shortly before she died. And this formed the basis of a painting called Colour Her Gone, which is one of 3 paintings of Marilyn Monroe that Pauline Boty made. So that really was the start of it.
Yeah.
And it's led on to all sorts of interesting avenues ever since.
Oh, that's fascinating. Thank you.
So that's super interesting. And of course we know that you're an old Stoic.
Yes.
Do you think anything about kind of the iconic architecture you were surrounded by when being at Stowe influenced your interest in the arts?
I do, absolutely. I've said this to many people. I think it was a quote by Roxburgh along the lines of, anyone going to Stowe will have an appreciation of, beauty and art and architecture. It's something along those lines as a result. And I think it's impossible not to actually. I mean, these grounds are just
amazing,
remarkable, aren't they? Really, I think I've seen it described Stowe as the largest artwork, or the largest piece of art in the country or Europe or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing is it's a creation, isn't it? Really,
within itself,
massive scale. So yes, absolutely, very much so.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, so obviously Pauline's had quite a big, like, widespread career over like acting as well as art. So do you think, and she's obviously been on the media a lot for like her bubbly personality. Do you think that like how like the reflection between that, her personality and her art is like, I don't really know, like it's quite a difference because her art's obviously very like goes over quite serious topics. How could you expand on that for us?
Yes, I think, I mean, her art, as we'll see in the talk, I mean, her art evolved over the course of her career. You know, she started off doing figurative art. I mean, some of it was really homages to other artists like Bonnard, Picasso. She then went through a period of creating abstract art. With the collages she was creating were very different. They were very quirky, a mixture of Victorian engravings and pieces she cut out of magazines and catalogues and so forth. And with her art, I mean, I think her bubbly personality definitely comes across in some of it because it, you know, there's some real humour in it. But then there's also a real mix of, I would say there's proto-feminism in there. You know, there is political art. And then there's, I think as much as anything, she wanted to get away from pop art and for the most part, the objectification of women that, you know, dare I say it, Peter Blake, much as I love his work, you know, Alan Jones, Peter Phillips and so forth, even Warhol to an extent, you know, it was very much sort of, it was objectifying women, it's as simple as that. And she was saying, I'm going to look at, I'm going to look at, say, Marilyn, for example, as a fan and as a woman. And so she was kind of flipping it. But she was also taking someone like, there's a fabulous work we'll see called With Love to Jean-Paul Belmondo. And essentially, you know, the Nouvelle Vague film star. And it's a portrait of him, but then, and he's wearing a sort of straw bow tie, but on top of that, there's this giant rose. And that's essentially Pauline Boty saying, you know, I lust after this man. So it's kind of flipping the narrative, really, but in a very humorous way.
Yeah. So would you say like artists like Blake, so the artists, the male artists specifically of that time, almost like ignited a flame in her to like want to do art that contradicts what they're trying to say almost?
I would say absolutely, yes, very much. Yes, I mean she, although they were friends, you know, they were her friends and her peers, I think she wanted to say, you know, I want to create art from a woman's viewpoint, and I also want to be. The other thing is she wanted to be glamorous and she wanted to be seen with the art. You know, she felt if the abstract expressionists can be there photographed with their art, why shouldn't she be photographed as well? You know, so she was photographed with a number of works as well. So yes, very much. I think she very much wanted to change the narrative, really.
Yeah, thank you.
I was going to ask, how do you think her, like, some attributes of her art differed from other male artists of the time, like Peter Blake and...
Well, I think one of the things was, actually it's not completely fair, because Peter Blake, I think, particularly with the works he was doing for, say, some of the, you know, the musicians he loved, like the Everly Brothers, Beatles, the Beach Boys, she was creating art from a fan, but I would say that was something that wasn't the case with a number of the other male artists. Yeah. You know, they were creating, it was much more a case of creating art of women as, you know, as beautiful objects, essentially. And what she was doing was creating from, you know, from the feminine gaze, really, female gaze, rather than there wasn't the objectifying about it. And she was also, you know, she did a work, for example, of Monica Vitti. So Monica Vitti was an Italian actress, but she was creating the art because she was saying, I love the work that this actress is creating. Likewise with Monroe, she wasn't saying, I'm creating a work to show a beautiful woman. She was saying, I'm creating this work. She is a beautiful woman, but also, she's a great actress. She had her own production company. She was a very strong individual in her own right, as well as being, a beautiful woman, really.
And do you think, you keep mentioning how she creates her work off of fan based, do you think she had any favourite role models in particular that she would have constantly kept using within her art?
Well, it was undoubtedly Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see a collage that she created from 60 to 61. I'm preempting the talk a bit, but what's interesting about that is that whereas I'm going to show a couple of works by Peter Phipps and Peter Blake, and they are showing Marilyn alongside other women, essentially, but one of a number of women. What Pauline does by comparison is she takes Marilyn Monroe and then she puts her among, there's a pen of Beethoven's, there's Marcel Proust, there's Colette, there's Madame de Pompadour and Juliette Recamier, there's Velasquez. So she's saying, she is an equal to these intellectuals and artists and politicians and so forth. So it's a very different sort of take on things, I would say. She also created 3 paintings in Marilyn's honour. I think there's some debate actually as to whether one was created, the paintings in particular were created before Marilyn died, or whether they were created afterwards. It's something, there's a bit of research going on at the moment. But yes, I would say Marilyn was the woman, the person she most closely identified with.
Yeah. So obviously she sadly died quite at a young age. Do you think if her career carried on, it would have taken her in a more art direction or an actress direction, would you say?
Well, there was, I saw a talk recently, and what came up in it was that she'd be looking at the possibility of directing, I think, as in film, which is a really interesting avenue for her to go down. I have no doubt that if she was alive today, that her art would have undergone this reappraisal anyway, and that she would be regarded as one of the cornerstones of British pop art, actually. I think, this wasn't what you asked, but I think it's worth touching on that. I think one of the reasons why she did disappear out of view was that she didn't have a major gallery behind her at the time. If it had been David Hockney that had died or Peter Blake, I think they would have been immediately kind of seized upon, and it would have been, their work would have been much more prevalent, if you like, or there would be much more exposure of it. Pauline Boty died in 1966, and there wasn't a single one of her paintings seen in the UK until 1993. None. They all went to her sister-in-law's farm, fortunately, and they were just in an outbuilding, just stacked up. So she basically just disappeared. I think as well, maybe the world just wasn't ready for her art, because she wasn't selling her art during her lifetime, really. It's one of the things I really admire about her, that technically she had the ability to produce whatever art would sell effectively, but instead she chose to create the art that really mattered to her. She had this message to put across, and she didn't back down from that. If anything, her work became more political and more confrontational, if you like, as time went on, rather than being easier to find a market, perhaps.
Yeah.
And do you think because she grew up in a very male-dominated family with 3 brothers and a very assertive father reminding her of her female position in life. Do you think that strived for her to, you know, work harder, produce more abstract art, as you may say, and, you know, kind of put herself more out there because she was being so restrained within a male field?
I certainly think that, well, undoubtedly she was teased a lot by the twins, you know, the twins that were she had an eldest brother, then she had two twins, and then she came along as the youngest. And apparently, yes, they teased her a lot, and she was always fighting with them. Her father, as you say, was very, you know, he was very traditional, and he had this idea that she should just get married and settle down on completing her schooling. I think she was just a free spirit anyway, but you know, the fact that she was being she was being kind of edged into this role, I think she would fight against that naturally anyway. Her mother got TB when she was young, and she had to take over all the sort of cooking and being mother basically. So that would have given her a real sense of independence. But I think also it was just so hard for women at the time. You know, if you know, as I'll say in the talk, when she applied to join the RCA, she ended up doing stained glass. But to get into the fine art department, there were 6 women out of 32. You know, that was in 1958, and in the staff, 6 women out of, I think it was 62 members of staff. You know, so it was such a male-dominated environment, really. So I think just to get ahead, you had to have a real, real sense of drive and talking to talking to other people, biographers, and in particular her friend Derek Bosher, who I met quite a few times. She was very driven. You know, she really wanted to succeed. You know, she really wanted to be an artist. That was her first choice. The acting was something that was provided the funds, but it was really the art that she loved. She always kept doing it.
Yeah. You briefly mentioned a few moments ago about how once she sadly passed away, all of her art was taken by her family. Do you think, what was the reason behind them not then publishing it, if there was one?
I think they were so traumatized. You know, she was so young, 28, really. I think it was unexpected. I don't know how much you know of the story, but she had got pregnant. She was just about to appear in her first film role, actually, as it happened. But that's by the by. So she got pregnant. She effectively had the choice to have radiotherapy and lose the baby, or to carry through to term, to have the baby and then have the radiotherapy afterwards. And what she hoped to do was to have the baby and then get the treatment. And she felt it might knock a few years off her life. But ultimately, you know, she only survived her daughter, Boty, by 6 months, I think it was. So I think, you know, for her family and her friends, they were so traumatized by that they just wanted to kind of, they just wanted to kind of take the art and, you know, just put it away somewhere, really.
Do you think her story behind, because her art was rediscovered, am I correct in thinking that?
Yes, it was. I mean, it was saved by her sister-in-law, Bridget. It was stored away in her parents' loft originally, and then I think when the father was moving, or suddenly, you know, they couldn't stay there any longer. There was talk, in fact, of them just being chucked in a skip, which is quite a concept, isn't it?
Thank God they
really?
didn't, yeah.
And Bridget said no. You know, the sister-in-law, she said these need to be saved for the daughter, and they were put in a horse box and taken down this outbuilding on her farm in Kent, so the farm of one of the brothers. And there they stayed until 1993, when an art historian called David Mellor was putting on an exhibition called, I think it was the 60s art scene in London, and he'd seen this documentary called Pop Goes the Easel, and he thought, I wonder what happened to those paintings. And he tracked down the daughter. They went down to the farm. There they were. They were dry and they were safe. I think a bit dusty, but they were then brought out and in the exhibition. And then really it's been a sort of incremental thing ever since.
Yeah, do you think because they were rediscovered and how then people were aware of the story behind them, it made them more popular when they came back out into the world?
Well, I find that pretty much everybody who comes across Pauline Boty finds out about the backstory and becomes absolutely fascinated by it, because it's just incredible what she achieved in that life recently. In her life rather. I mean, recently, for example, I would say Bob Dylan. I don't know if you've become more interested in Bob Dylan as a result of
The movie.
the Chalamet and but he's, Bob Dylan is kind of the moment right now, isn't he? And on his arrival to the UK, Pauline Boty meets him off the plane with the guy she's having, Philip Saville, who she's having this relationship with. And Pauline Boty ends up showing Bob Dylan around London for a couple of weeks. I mean, maybe 6 months ago that would have been quite interesting. Now it's just remarkable, actually, isn't it? The fact that she appeared on stage twice at the Royal Court Theatre, she was in a number of TV plays. Have you heard of Ready, Steady, Go by any chance?
I feel like the name rings a bell, but I'm not exactly sure what it is.
I mean, it was a TV, it was a music show basically every Friday for 3 years in the 60s, and it was massively influential. So she danced on the first episode. She won the twist competition, and then she danced repeatedly after that. And then, she had the flat where she was. That was a real kind of meeting point, almost like a salon for the poets and writers and other artists. I mean, she was right in at the kind of epicenter of swinging London, basically.
Possibly just a finalising question. Do you have a favourite Boty piece that you find remarkable?
Well, yes, I mean, I think my favourite actually is probably The Only Blonde in the World, one of the Marilyn paintings. And happily, that is one that is in the Tate. It's part of the permanent collection, so anyone could go to Tate Britain and see it there. I should mention the website actually. Are you aware of the website?
I think, did you send us a link to it? So I had a brief reading of it before coming here, but we'll definitely do some more later in depth now we've spoken to you.
I might do a quick plug for that regardless.
Yeah, tell
actually.
us about it.
So essentially, the reason I'm here really is that I mean, what happened, this can sound terribly pretentious, but I went to Kenwood House where they have a Vermeer, and I looked up Vermeer afterwards, and there's this fabulous website I think it's called Essential Vermeer, and it's basically, where all the Vermeers are kept, all the places where they're located and where they've been exhibited and the back history, and I just thought, wow, that is fantastic. And then I'd had this interest in Pauline Boty, but it occurred to me there was no equivalent website for her. And I just thought, I wonder if I could put one together. So essentially, about 5 or 6 years ago, I started off by putting up a list of all the works by category, and then it's been building ever since. So there's the exhibitions, there's a map of her London, there's a poll where you can vote, there's lists to articles, there's news. I mean, there's interviews, so it just keeps building and building, but it just keeps on leading down all these interesting avenues. I mean, people contact me. Someone contacted me about 2 weeks ago, actually, and they said, this guy said, I don't have an email, so I don't know how he was getting in contact with me in that case, but He said, this is my number, and a Pauline Boty work got sold at auction in Oxford some months ago. I mean, it sounds very dubious to me, actually, but you never know, it could be the case. So, yes, I'll follow that up sometime.
Did you find it hard to like date all of the artworks because they've just been just found at once, weren't they?
Well, a lot of them actually are written down as circa 60 to 61, for example.
Oh, okay.
So they're in a kind of bracket. I'm actually working on a book with one of Pauline's biographer, a woman called Sue Tate, and she is one of the key figures, along with David Mellor that I mentioned earlier, in terms of bringing Pauline back into the light, as it were. She wrote an MA on Pauline. She co-curated a solo show in Wolverhampton in 2013. That went then to Pallant House, and it went to Poland, actually. The Grabowski Gallery I mentioned earlier, the guy that ran that, his collection of pop art is now in Poland, so they had the exhibition there. But I'm going to be helping research a book on the arts, and I'm hoping what we'll be able to do in that is really, see if we can re-examine all the dates and just, check all the dates in particular. The naming is a bit different depending on where you look, so try and get the definitive work, as it were.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
It's an endlessly fascinating topic, actually.
Mystery.
Yeah.
Well, we're super excited to hear more from you later. Thank you so much for spending the time to talk to us.
It's my pleasure. Very nice to meet you. Thank you.
Before I stop recording, is it possible you tell us the URL for your website?
Oh yes, certainly. Yeah. It's paulineboty.org. There's also an Instagram feed as well, for what that's worth, and I try and post once a week on that, and it won't necessarily go on the website, so the two kind of complement each other. Just not X anymore.
Thank you.